People want to believe their horse is a complete individual, again, to abdicate blame for why they aren't doing what they want.
Everyone says they want the truth. But what happens when someone actually tells it? Karl Cook is a top-level showjumper, Olympic medalist, an innovator, and a rider who doesn't play by the industry's rules. He's blunt, he's curious, and he's not here to sell you shortcuts. In this episode, Karl shares why we chase the wrong solutions, ignore the basics, and spend money in all the wrong places. Why we avoid the hard fixes, the discipline we lack, the balance issues we won't face, the simple changes that would actually move the needle. And why we tell ourselves the same story. My horse is just different. A story that helps us dodge responsibility. From building his own bits to tracking every detail of horse care, Karl's not chasing what's easy. He's chasing what works.
Dear Horse World, it's Karl Cook.
Karl, welcome to the Dear Horse World podcast.
It's great to be here.
I am so happy you're here. I'm going to tell you my nickname for you, the Mad Scientist.
I mean, the first word works.
Okay, so I'm going to explain to everyone who's listening and watching why I call you the Mad Scientist. So over the years, watching and getting to know you, when I would come to the shows a lot, you'd pull me in sometimes to the barn or into the alleyway, and you'd show me something really cool that you were working on. And I've always really admired that kind of innovative mind that you have. So I wanted to ask you, what are the latest and greatest innovations, products, things that you're building, testing, trying that we might not know about yet?
Yeah, so what am I working on now? I released a new bit last year, which I'm really proud of. I designed a couple years back. Didn't really plan on releasing it, but the opportunity came about. We have some new versions of it coming out soon. I have a new Bridal coming out. That's taken a while to get to where we can actually, have production of any quality. I made some studs for some of my horses that are lighter weight, and trying to take that element out of things. There's also work on trying to add sensors when you ride, not in the saddle or on the girth. There's plenty of those. Mm-hmm. But they don't really tell you anything actionable. They give you data, which is cool, but it's only distraction, a lot of it, because it's not connected to more actionable stuff. So I've put tension sensors on my reins and on my stirrups, and I use them for training. And then those could help some of the data points from some of the other sensors, but you kind of need those actionable items, your reins and your stirrups, because that's all we talk about. When we ride is, you were too late to sit up and pull the reins to get that line done, or you yanked your horse off the floor, or you had all your weight in your right stirrup. That's, common conversation, and these will confirm or deny that. It'll tell you exactly how much time it took you to pull. It'll tell you, did you actually yank? Or were you actually have all your weight in your right stirrup? Or were you balanced? So you can actually just be more accurate with your analysis of your rounds.
Okay, this is really cool. I kind of want to dive into this because you're doing something that we've never been able to do before.
Yeah.
Technology allows for what you're talking about.
It allowed for 15 years ago.
But not 50 years ago.
Well, no. But this is just an application of technology that we have. It's nothing new. It's just a application that no one's tried, I think, outside of a lab, maybe.
So why you're taking the ability for technology to accumulate data? Why is data important to someone like you?
I think data informs decisions. And we have our feeling in our sport, and we use that as data right now because it's what we have. And some people are more accurate than others. but I think there are things that you can benefit from if you actually have more objective data. Like we spoke about years ago, the footing measuring, tension measuring in your reins and your stirrups is a great continuance of that, and it just helps inform your decisions. If you think you made a mistake, but then the data shows you didn't make the mistake you thought, well, then you made a different mistake that you have to go figure out. But if you thought you made a mistake that you didn't make, you'll go down that road of fixing a mistake that you didn't actually make.
Yeah.
And then you're like, why am I not getting better? Well, you're trying to fix something that wasn't broken.
Do you feel like to me, what it reminds me of as you're speaking of is the contrast or the conflict between subjectivity and objectivity?
I don't think they're in conflict. I think they're critical. I think it's important that people have really well-developed subjective feel. And I think it's important for objectivity to fill in where it's most well-suited. I think if we then get to a point where young riders are riding off of data and they're not actually thinking and they're not actually feeling, they won't be able to communicate at all what they're feeling. They'll just look at a screen and be like, oh, I did it perfect. And that's wrong. Should you pull more with your right rein or your left rein? I don't know. Maybe. But if your goal is always to be even, sometimes you need to have asymmetry. And if you're riding off of just the data, you will fail. And so it's important that the objectivity is just a supplement to confirm or deny your feeling and your trainer's feeling or your team, that sort of thing.
It kind of reminds me of what you're talking about, the importance of subjectivity, the importance of field, the importance of being able to apply data, but also the ability to collect data. Kind of feels like where art and science meet when it comes to horses.
I don't know if art's the right term. I hate the term, but it's the best term. It's your feel. I can get data that shows that I pull more with my left rein doing a right to left change than a left to right change. Okay, cool. Which one is correct? Well, that's where your feel comes in that says, oh, I think the stickiness on my right to left change is maybe due to a pre-existing injury that we know of, and that affects the gait a certain way. Or if the horse isn't rotating his neck to the left, that's why I'm pulling more with my left rein, that can mean he doesn't want to compress the left side or he doesn't want to extend the right side. And that compression on the left side would mean that it could be these structures. Extension on the right side would mean these other structures. And so that's where your knowledge and your feel and your experience comes in. Mm-hmm. The brain tension data just tells you something, very basic, but you have to fill that in with the rest of your experience and your team's experience.
So let's talk a little bit about this bit and the bridle. First of all, what did you see in the market that didn't exist and why you wanted to create something unique to you?
I didn't want to.
You didn't?
No, you only create things out of necessity. You don't create them because they're already there. I had a specific need for something and nothing that existed could fill that need. I have a deep bit box, trust me. Nothing could fill that need. And I had an idea of combining two different bits in a way that hasn't been done before, and it ended up working, and I used that bit a lot. I show one of my horses, I've shown him in it for years, and it accomplished the goal I wanted for it, and that was the whole thing. That was the end. I had a need, I filled it with a bit, and then down the road I met someone who could help produce the bit because I thought it could be useful for other people. Because I have a couple other bits that I've had designed for, again, a need for me, but that use case is so narrow and you need to really know what you're doing to get the benefit of it. Mm-hmm. Where this one, I think, is you can get the benefit from it a lot simpler. And I thought it could help a lot of people because that need, I feel, is more widespread and people don't know that they need it. They just know that they're struggling with something. And I believe this bit can help.
What is that need?
It's a bridge between a pelham and a swale. Everyone knows what a pelham is. I think like 2/3 to 3/4 of all show jumping horses go in a pelham. It's great because it keeps the horse stable, but by doing so, it makes it kind of just dull. I frankly can't ride in a pelham because it's too dull. I can't turn. I can't do all these things that you need to do. It's just too dull. It's just ugh. But it makes the horse stable, which is great. And that stability can really help riders who need that stability. But sometimes horses are just so dull on it. On the other side, on a swale, it's great because it can make horses really, really light. The problem is horses need to have some weight on the bit on the final approach to a fence. And a swale, oftentimes, that final approach, when the horses load your hands, they'll pop off the bit because they want to load and the bit is not letting them load. Not because it's aggressive, it's just how it works. So what I did is my bit is a combination of a pelham, the strengths of a pelham, and the activity of a swale. So you have the stability, but you also have more, a more dynamic feel than you ever get with a pelham.
Cool. Why do horses, I think that a lot of people listening might want me to ask this question. Why do horses need to load on the bit before they jump?
I think it loads their body. I think it's like loading a rubber band. If you just take a loose rubber band, it's not going to fly across the room. That load is like loading up a rubber band. And I think it's just that simple. It'd be like saying jump, but don't bend your knees.
Yeah, that's, I think, a really cool explanation. Because a lot of our listeners are deep in the world of jumping, and some aren't. So I think it's a really cool opportunity. The biomechanics that happen when horses jump over fences, especially at the height that they jump with you, is a really exciting thing to witness. And I think when you dive into the biomechanics, the balance aspects of it, the angles, it's really interesting. We did a little bit of that when Nikki Simpson came into the episode, into the studio. It was really cool to talk about it. Okay, so we've touched on the bit. Do you have a name for the bit?
We call it a swellum. So it's a combination of a swale and a pelham.
Nice.
I thought about naming it something unique, but it was already new and, didn't want to confuse people. I want it just to make sense to them. So
cool.
Yeah.
The bridle.
Just a leather bridle.
Well, you're really selling it, Karl.
No, I mean, there's all these new bridles where it relieves pull pressure or it moves the cheek piece so it doesn't pinch on a nerve that's there, or, all of this stuff. First of all, people will put on a bridle that doesn't put pull pressure, but in that there's so many more straps around the cheeks and around the horse's face, and then they put on a pelham. A pelham's designed to apply pull pressure. Its design is literally based around applying pull pressure. So if you're complaining that your horse is sensitive to pull pressure, yet you are required to use a pelham or a gag or any of that, it makes no sense. And also people with tighter nosebands, any tension in the noseband puts downward pressure on the pull, whether it's because the horse is opening their mouth against the noseband or because you put a tight noseband. It doesn't matter. Any noseband tension puts downward pressure, and anyone can do this. Just put your bridle on, put your hand underneath the crown piece, and twist the noseband. So you're slowly tightening it, and you will feel downward pressure on your hand. So all this anti-pull pressure stuff, I think maybe 0.1% of the time it's actually needed. I think the rest of the time it's used as a cover so people don't have to actually fix the problem. I have never had a horse with a pull pressure problem. I know every horse is unique and a special flower, but I also don't really I can't think of one horse that I ride in that their show bridle applies pull pressure, except for Caracol with Hackamore. That's the only one. Again, I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm just saying it's used as to abdicate blame for what's actually happening. But more than that, I think a lot of the bridles nowadays are just really cheap. even if you spend a lot on them, just because you spent a lot doesn't mean that they're well made. You'll pick one up and it'll smell like chemicals. Well, that's because it's not vegetable tanned and it's chromium tanned in like Bangladesh. And they don't last, and people just accept that. And I wanted to make a bridle that works, that has better leather, that works better, and if you clean it moderately correctly, will last a long time. And we tie everything together, so the bridle matches and is made out of the same leather as the martingale, it matches the reins, it matches, so the whole thing looks correct, instead of having these mixed matched pieces that just don't look right. Yeah, I mean, as a kid, I remember using electrical tape or zip ties or, whatever you could have, or you put on a different noseband, but you didn't have that noseband in the bridle that the bridle was, so you put that on, but it doesn't match at all and it looks ugly. So, we're just trying to use the leather that people don't use and use because it's expensive. But for me, it's worth it, and I don't like designing something I know is going to fail in a certain period of time. It's more profitable. It's way more profitable.
Yep.
But that's not hard, and it's not fun to design a product that you know is going to fail. You can just so much easier. You just know it's going to fail. You don't have to solve the problem.
It's interesting because we talked about this when Jochen Schleser came into the studio to talk about saddle fit. And I don't think people, do you think as an industry we talk enough about the commercial patterns of tack fit and the fact that he says you make more money when something fails and needs to get replaced? Do you think we talk about that enough?
No, but I mean, in society, we don't. What's the technical term for it? Planned obsolescence is the technical term for it. You plan for it to obsolesce. And they do that all over. We can make light bulbs that last millions of hours. Why don't we? Because it's not profitable. We could make saddles that last longer. Why don't we? It's not that profitable. And also, people are cheap. There's plenty of studies out there where everyone says, "Oh, we want organic produce," but then when people see the price difference between the two, like 98% of them go to the conventional.
Yeah. Do they really want organic?
They don't want to pay for it. They want it, but they don't want to pay the difference. So if you have a conventionally made saddle versus one that'll last you 4 times as long but is twice as expensive, you'll go for the cheaper one.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think we do that?
I don't know. It's human nature. There's so much work to try to figure it out. It's just expensive.
I also wonder whether we have an ability to delay gratification the way that we used to, because we live in such an
there wasn't an
instant
option.
What do you mean?
I think people weren't as good at planned obsolescence in the past.
Okay.
So stuff actually lasted.
Mm-hmm.
And there wasn't an option between something that doesn't last and something that does.
So then let's talk about the studs.
Yeah, I mean, I had a need for lighter weight studs, so I made lighter weight studs.
Why did you have a need?
I had a horse that was barefoot her whole life that needed to jump on grass, so we had to put shoes on her. We put plastic shoes on her, and I made really lightweight studs so that we didn't slip. And that was to minimize the difference between barefoot and having the plastic shoes on.
Okay, this is really cool because I really wanted to dive into the individuality of each of your horses and how you navigate that. But before we go there, I think this would be a really good opportunity to talk about one. So you've tried, and you're using plastic, like glue-on?
No.
No.
I think glue-on. I haven't tested it yet, but I think it's bad.
Okay, so you're using plastic shoes
That are nailed on.
And you're using it on your mare. Can you name who the horse?
On Caracal.
On
We're
Caracal.
going to start using it on some others too.
Okay. And she was barefoot her whole life.
Yeah.
So you wanted to use lightweight shoes because she wasn't used to that. Like, she's gone her whole
Yeah, and we wanted
career.
flexible shoes. We wanted, every piece to be as similar as before. So.
And how's it going?
Been going great.
Great.
Yeah.
So you wanted to create a lightweight, you wanted to recreate that lightweight feel that she has. she's had for most of her life. But
Yeah,
she has
biomechanically, it's different. We know that when you take shoes off a horse who had been in shoes, there's differences to their gait. We know that when you take a barefoot horse and you put shoes on, there's differences in their gait and there's differences in their jump. And we wanted the best parts of both sides of it.
So a horse that's barefoot will slip on grass.
Yeah, it's like no one plays soccer or American football and goes with formal shoes they go to dinner with.
Right.
Not gonna work. You need cleats. You need studs.
So you want her to feel confident, like the angles and the speed at which you're moving at the
if you're going full speed and turn and you think you're going to slip, you're not going to turn.
Right.
So, and you're also not going to push off the ground. If you don't have a stable platform to push, they won't push. So you have less scope.
Okay, so let's start. I love this topic, especially with someone like yourself, because I think you can describe really eloquently how the process that you go through when you get a new horse and determining their individual needs. What is that process for you?
I think this is a dangerous topic because people believe that their horse is one of one, and all of the normal processes you can do don't apply to their horse, apply to everyone else's, but not to theirs.
Okay.
And so they think that everything about their horse has to be completely different and nothing else will work. And they spin themselves down a rabbit hole. And guess what? Horse never gets better and they don't get better. The differences between my horses, sure, there are differences, but if you actually see what it's like, it's not that different. People want to believe their horse is a complete individual, again, to abdicate blame for why they aren't doing what they want.
That's an interesting call to action.
And if I have a horse that's a little bit colder, I'll give him a little bit more energetic food. If I have a horse that's hotter, I'll give him a little bit less energetic food. But they're still I'm not saying my horse processes carbohydrates different than another horse. No. I'm not saying a feed won't work with that horse. No. They all the saddles are the same. Their boots are the same. The only reason for the bits being different is a little bit different in just their base biomechanics. Because, one might be taller, shorter, longer stride, shorter stride, that sort of thing. But I think horses are individual, but this understanding that my horse, think of the odds. If it's a 1% chance that something doesn't work with your horse, okay, there's one thing that's 1% chance. A second thing, now your horse is 1 in 10,000. 2 1% things. The likelihood of that is 1 in 10,000. Now one more, 1 in 100, that's 1 in a million. A third. Now a fourth, that's 1 in 100 million. So that's 4 1 in 100 things. It's 1 in 100 million.
Yeah.
The likelihood. So your horse is an individual, but most of the time when people are saying, my horse is just different, it's just different. That's just to allow themselves to make it okay that they're getting less out of their relationship and to make it okay that them as a rider and as a manager aren't doing what they should be doing. I know that's maybe not the most comfortable way to look at it for people, and they'll push back on it and say, no, my horse really is one of one.
Well, I think if you look at biology, there are similarities amongst people, and then there are also individual needs, right? And so it's a balance between the two. Is one person one of one? Well, we're one of many.
Yeah, but I mean, good horse care is good horse care. If you have bad horse care and say my horse doesn't like this one skin product, but you have bad horse care, I would say, how about you have good horse care first? Then we can talk. I just think it's dangerous.
I love that. And you're someone that actually has spoken very openly about, I think you did a walking and talking about the importance that we teach our young riders, our up and coming generation, not just about riding, but about horse care, about management, about keeping horse, about finding horse, there's so many elements that go into success. So what you're talking about is a holistic look, right?
Yeah, and have structure to it. How can you come up with any solution if you're changing the variables at a whim? and you're not keeping track of any of the variables that you can keep track of. There are variables you can keep track of.
Like what?
How much weight and hay does your horse get a day? What time of day? How many times a day? When do they work? What weight are they at the same time of day every Monday? How much time do they spend in a paddock? What is the grass like in that paddock? How often do you clean the shavings? Do you know that each batch of your hay has the same nutrient density as the batch before?
What's cool is that we're coming back to data. You're coming back to measurable data.
Control the variables you can, because there's plenty you can't. So at least control the ones you can.
Really cool.
At least.
So walk me through the process. What's the kind of timeline that you look at when you get a new horse? What's the timeline of observation, let's say, that you have in your mind or in your program when you're trying to determine the very best, let's say, ingredients for that horse within the structure and within the program that you run?
Well, first they have to be fed stably. So whatever they were fed before, if it's your decision to feed them the exact same thing the exact same way, that would keep it stable.
Okay.
If you choose to make a change, it takes a certain period of time for that change to manifest. For example, if you decide to feed them twice the amount of calories, they're not going to get fat tomorrow. They'll get fat in a period of time. And you obviously have to go for a search to figure out the right equipment. Tendency would be, this horse went in this bit before, so I'm only ever going to use that bit. Well, you're not the rider who rode it before. You might be taller, shorter, stronger, weaker, older, younger. And we almost never, I think there's only one horse that I go in the same bridle in, ever. So you have to get a stable feed and stable flat work.
Okay.
Because then you can say, okay, well, these things are stable. Is the horse still heavy? Is the horse still light? Is the horse dull? Is the horse too hot? Is the horse skittish? How has the body changed? Does the saddle that we fit in the beginning still fit because they lost weight or gained muscle or just gained fat maybe? And then you just slowly tweak from there. You tweak, one variable at a time, and you just step along the process. Obviously if the program the horse is in before compared to yours is very different, you'll see a lot more change, and it'll probably happen faster but also take longer. So there's no cookie cutter 6 weeks, but it's also not, it takes forever. Like it's part of the work. You just step through it and you go from one day to the next. I don't think an expectation should be set.
I love that. What's one piece of advice for everyone who's listening who have a new horse, and let's say the horse went really well or didn't go so well with the previous rider? What do you think is one thing that everybody, regardless of their socioeconomic background, their geographical location, their area, their sport, any of that, what's one thing that every rider is capable of doing to accommodate a new horse?
Treat it well. Horse doesn't know if you're rich or you're poor. The horse doesn't know if you felt you spent a lot or a little. Your horse doesn't know your expectations or the expectations before. Just treat it well. And from that, you end up getting what you want, instead of just expecting and only treating it well if they give it to you. You don't do that with kids or dogs, where you're basically treating them poorly, hoping that they guess the right solution, and then you treat them well. How likely do you think it is a horse is going to guess the right solution? Because there's many steps to actually get to the right solution. But you haven't given them any of those steps, and you're expecting them to figure out all of those steps to get to the right solution, and then you treat it well. Just treat it well.
I love that.
Sorry, it's boring, but...
No? I like that you chose the word well instead of good or fair.
Just treat it well.
What do you think well means? What's your definition of well?
I mean, horses, they don't need a pretty barn. They don't need perfectly manicured shavings at all times. They don't need to have a soapy bath every day. They don't need, a lot of this stuff. They need highly functional surroundings. Even if the barn has old wood, they don't give a shit. As long as the wood doesn't stab them with shards of wood when they rub up against it on accident, that's fine. They don't need some state-of-the-art watering system that keeps track of every drop that they drink. No, they just need clean water in clean buckets. It's really not that hard. They need a diet that's appropriate for what they do, and that's fed to them many times a day, consistently, at the same time, all the meals, every day, and you to just be fair.
I love that statement because we've had some amazingly inspiring veterinarians in the studio, and they talk, about spend the money on getting the teeth floated properly instead of the brand new tack trunk, because that's not going to make the difference to your horse.
I mean, some people, they spend whatever they spend on a horse. Mm-hmm. And then they balk that you have to shoe them we might decide to shoe them every 4 weeks instead of every 6.
Yeah.
That'd be like me buying a Ferrari and putting, oil that's meant for a 1982 Acura in it. That's just dumb. Why are you saving money there? It makes no logical sense.
Yeah.
If you make the choice to invest in a horse, you have to invest in the whole horse, not just in the purchase price. And sorry to tell you that, but it's kind of self-explanatory.
Okay, so this I just really appreciate. I think a lot of people, judging by the popularity of Walking and Talking, I think people appreciate the way that you deliver things. And why, actually, here's a good question before we dive into a really cool, I wanted to talk to you about your style of riding. But before we do that, actually, why do you feel inspired, or a sense of maybe in the sense of responsibility? Why do you feel the need to tell people and speak honestly and speak openly and speak transparently? Because you don't have to. You could have no social media. You could just ride and focus on all your goals. You don't owe anyone any information, and yet you have dedicated a big part in Walking and Talking. I think a lot of people in the horse world would contribute or attribute it to be a tremendous effort in transparency and open dialogue. Why?
I think there's 2 main reasons. I would say they're not in sequential order.
Okay. At Connaway & Associates Equine Insurance Services, they understand how special your horse is. That's why I personally chose to work with them to insure my horses before we embarked on this epic journey across the country. I chose them because their agency writes coverage in 48 states. They also work with several A-rated admitted insurance carriers, so you have options and can select the insurance coverage that best suits your own unique needs. Having confidence in my insurance selection allows me peace of mind on this journey. I can focus on my horses and embrace these learning opportunities of a lifetime. Who better to trust with the insurance of your horse than a team of fellow horse people? Connaway & Associates was founded in 1992 by Laura Connaway, herself a Grand Prix show jumping rider. Laura and her experienced team have built a strong reputation as a reliable partner, building relationships through service, trust, and understanding. Explore www.connaway.net or call them for competitive, personalized insurance coverage options from their team of like-minded equine insurance professionals. I've been a fan of Karl Cook for a long time, not just because he's a great rider, but because he says the things most people won't. He asks the hard questions, he challenges old school thinking, he's honest about the ride, the good, the bad, and the messy in between. For the first time ever, you can access Karl's masterclasses on NF Plus at a new price and on your terms. You can rent a course for just $14.99 a month or own one forever for just $99.99. But honestly, the move is to unlock all 5, plus the entire NF Plus library of top instructors with an annual membership. And because you're listening here, you get 15% off with the code DHW. This is the kind of learning you don't find in quick clips or reels. It's the part most people miss. Once you've joined NF Plus, you'll wonder how you ever rode without it. Go to noellefloydplus.com/pages/Karl Cook to check it out.
I would say they're not in sequential order.
Okay.
First, it helps me because we all can think about a problem in our head for hours. We can talk about our feelings with our trainer for 4 hours. After a round, just all feelings and feelings and feelings. There's so many feelings, too many feelings. But actually having to say it out loud in a concise manner is helpful. Just like when someone says, write it down. Like, well, I've thought about it. Like, I know my thoughts. No, write it. Also, in one paragraph. That changes how you think about it. It changes your method of thinking, and you now don't have an option of being 3.5 hours of feelings. You have maybe 2 sentences of feelings, and then hopefully you do like 5 sentences on what you're going to do now. And me speaking is a lot similar to that. And it is helpful for me to do that. Also, a lot of times some people's comments are quite interesting. Maybe not in the way that I didn't expect it, but that doesn't mean it's not interesting and it's not helpful. So first of all, it's helpful. Second, I'm very grateful for a lot of the experiences and the people I've been able to learn from. I've been very fortunate to be able to learn from them in the way that I was able to do it. That is not the cheapest way to learn. And most of the time, the knowledge that people are searching for, whether they know it or not, is locked behind money they do not have. And so the help they get are generally misappropriated Band-Aids as opposed to what actually will help. That doesn't mean they'll do it, but what would actually help if they did. And I'm not saying I have all the right answers, because I don't. I would jump clear in every class if I did. But I want it to be cheaper for people to learn how to treat their horses well.
It's a really cool why.
It also helps me.
I like that you said that they're not in sequential order.
Well, because I was going to start with what I started with anyway.
Yeah.
I didn't want it to,
It's a really cool why, because I think there's some of us I think there's more people than maybe.
Well, actually, we also spend our money in really not objectively correct ways. So you'll spend, I don't know, what does it cost for a lesson?
It can cost anywhere from $50 to $250 to.
Great. Let's say your lesson costs $50 to $250, and you have 2 to 4 of those a week?
I think some people have them one time a week, sometimes
fine.
More.
That is a lot of money that you're paying consistently. Mm-hmm. And the point of why you're doing that is because you want consistent knowledge to change consistently to get better. And unfortunately, to get better, you have to change who you are. You can't get better without change. I know we're all perfect flowers the way we are, but you can't get better without changing.
Are we perfect flowers the way we are?
I was placating to an audience. No, but people want to assume that they can just change one tiny thing and everything will, they're doing everything right. It's just one little thing. But so let's say your lessons are $100 and you do 2 of them a week. That's $200, $800 a month. And that's just the lessons. That doesn't count the other expenses, which is really expensive.
Yeah.
Now, there are plenty of books. Each one can teach you more than any one of those lessons.
You think so?
Yeah. In one 1-hour lesson, a $30 book will teach you more than that 1-hour lesson. 100%.
That's really cool.
Yet, proverbial we, want to learn while sitting our ass in a saddle. And the thought that you would learn about riding not in a saddle, on a horse, in a ring, with someone talking to you, is just anathema to success for some reason. And so, back to my point, people spend money in the horse sports just unintelligently. Because you can get, I'm not saying in-person lessons while riding is useless. I'm saying it needs to come with other things that can actually make you have more context to what's being said. So you can get more out of those $100 lessons. And you can get better faster. But people don't do it. When I tell people what helped me the most outside of working with Eric was reading, they look at me like I speak in Chinese. And I also sit there and I see their reaction, and the only thing it tells me is it's only going to hurt them to have that reaction. It doesn't hurt me.
It makes me think of when we go to school, you would never just show up to class and listen to your teacher and not do any of the reading or any of the homework. Because then
there just wouldn't be reading or homework or anything. You would just be spoken at and then expect at the end to get a PhD. Right.
Because what I think you're talking about, and I love that you brought up that reading was the best way to get the most out of riding with, is that what you said? Riding with Eric, the best thing you could do was read. But what it makes me think of is that what you were doing was you were priming and enriching and building the brain that was receiving the information you're getting from Eric in a way that makes what you learn from him that much more valuable to you.
Sure. Also working with your vet. You know, I've studied one of my favorite books I've studied over and over again. It is boring as all hell because all it is rote memorization. It's an anatomy book. So it's just memorization.
Yeah.
Yet, when you can remember the various structures, you can then picture how they move, how they interact together, how if you have a little bit of swelling in this tendon, or let's say you have a little bit of, you have a tear in a suspensory.
Yeah.
You know, you have more context to what type of movements could have caused it. Is it a compensatory injury, which it 98% of the time is? So then what are they compensating for? If you don't treat that, you're not going to fix the suspensory. And you can adjust your flat work depending on what you're trying to strengthen or avoid, especially in rehab. And when you're talking to your vet and your vet's talking about what they see, you actually have context for what you're saying. And you actually know where the structures are that they're talking about. I mean, how many people listen to their vet like, oh, yeah, that's a good idea. But they have no idea if the vet's talking about a structure in the back, in the neck, in the leg.
Sorry, present company included. For most of my junior
and how much would it have helped you? You know,
so much. But I was intimidated to even say I don't actually have any clue about what you're talking about. Yeah. Now, I definitely.
Or, pay $20 a month for an AI search engine so that you can search your questions.
Yeah.
I just don't get why people don't do that. I just don't. Never will.
I think I think there's a lot less education, especially about biomechanics and about anatomy, than
the books are out there.
Most people are comfortable to admit.
They're out there. The books are there. I agree. And actually, the main book I'm thinking of was, I think it was printed in 2004.
2004.
Yeah.
Not 1904.
No, 2004. I think it was 2004.
Well, you know what we should do is in the show notes to this episode.
So it was in one of your previous things that you posted, my 5 books.
Yep.
I already spoke about 2 of those 5 books.
Okay. because we're going to include them in the show notes.
And the book is on Amazon for like $45.
There you go.
And like, why wouldn't you do that? Like, just why? It makes no sense.
Well, and I think an Olympian sitting in the studio saying that it will tangibly contribute to your riding.
Just try it.
And see what happens.
Yeah.
So we talked about, I'm glad you brought up Eric, because so for those who are listening and watching who don't know, you have ridden with and worked with Eric Neve for how many years now?
Almost 13.
Right. And and you would consider him a great mentor of yours.
Mm-hmm. Of course.
So I think Eric, personally, I think he's one of the greatest of all time. I think he's unbelievable. So at what point do you go from riding like Eric to riding like Karl Cook? Because everyone in the horse world talks about this. They talk about, you kind of ride in the style that you're mentored in until you develop your own individual approach. Mm-hmm. When did that happen for you?
I always had my own style before I rode with Eric.
Okay.
I was never, for good or for bad, my first barn I was at never really forced a position on me. There's many good things about that. There's also some less good things. It's, nothing's good, nothing's all or nothing.
Yeah.
But I went to Eric because too much stuff was not working. So I needed to learn that stuff that wasn't working. So I changed how I rode because it was the right plan. It was the right way, so that Eric wouldn't have to teach around what I didn't want to learn. And so I rode as much as I could like him. Obviously, I knew that I would fail because you can never ride 100% like anyone. It's just impossible. But I knew I needed to learn a bunch of stuff. So that's what I did. And then maybe I started to ride more like myself once I started to pick my own horses.
Okay.
Because I had a certain type of horse when I was a young rider that I was very successful on, that obviously stopped working. But then for a number of years, I didn't pick my horses. And you could say it's a bad thing, but also those horses had characteristics that helped me learn those things I didn't know.
Yeah.
If you are trying to learn how to use your leg better, yet your horse is a runaway, you're never going to learn how to use your leg. This just won't happen. You need a horse that needs, a good leg for you to learn, is my leg helping or not?
Mm-hmm.
So, but once I started to be in charge of picking my own horses, then, stylistically, I could take what I, had been and was learning with Eric and bringing in horses that were more similar to what I was successful with when I was younger. But now, since I knew so much more, then those errors and those issues from the past, the hope was, wouldn't come back.
So what is that type of horse now? How would you describe the horse that you...
Just a modern horse. It's just a modern, people joke that it's only one type of horse because I only have hot bay mares, but...
Also, we all love the fact that you have hot bay mares.
Yeah, I do have an inordinate number of hot bay mares. I am not looking for only hot bay mares. But, there's always a balance of feel that you're going for. And I think nowadays the courses are getting more delicate. The times are getting faster. The jump offs are getting faster. You need a smart, quick, active, delicate sport horse. Those big boats of things that used to be more successful. I think what we do in the ring now is different. So you can see people are riding quicker, hotter, more energetic horses than they used to.
Okay, I'm going to ask you a hard question, which I wasn't expecting to ask you, but you say that statement. So because we are breeding hotter, sportier, finer horses, and the way that the sport has evolved, things are really technical. So you have two factors. When we talk about change, you talk about data. So those are two factors that have changed. So the additional factor that's important to creating success is horsemanship. Do you think horsemanship has caught up or is in alignment with the breeding and the technicality of the sport?
I think some people are breeding lighter horses. What I would say is more accurate is we are selecting those for the top sport. Those heavy horses just don't go to the top sport anymore. They go to teach juniors, amateurs, they go to hunters or equitation or, they just go somewhere else.
And they find success elsewhere.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that. The horses we are selecting for the top sport are just different. Now, sure, they're attempting to breed, every breeder's trying to breed horses they can sell for a lot of money.
Yeah.
So, they're trying to look into their crystal ball for that. I think the horsemanship at the top level absolutely has 100% keeps up. It's the most dynamic place to be. So on that side, yes. Mm-hmm. But also even though that group of people at the high end is bigger than it ever has been, it's still tiny in comparison to, the rest of horse sports. But that's always the way it's going to be.
Yes.
Should it be different? Yeah.
It's why it's a pyramid. But it's not a rectangle.
Yeah, but also if you stick a non-top rider in and amongst those top riders, they will miss 96% of what's happening. Now, will they get better faster than if they were hidden at home trying to learn by themselves? Sure. But you're going to miss a whole lot. I don't know how to change it. Mm-hmm. I don't think enough people are up to telling their secrets. There aren't any secrets. They just think they are. So you can't ride like them anyway. So why does it matter if they use 3 nails on the outside and 2 nails on the inside, or they use this stirrup or that stirrup, or this supplement or that supplement, or whatever? You can't ride like them anyways. Doesn't matter.
Okay, I'm going to say a statement. I'm really curious what you think about it. I had a really interesting cowboy. I asked him if he was ever going to write a book, and he said, "No, I'm not going to write a book because it's all been written." Do you think that's true?
No, I mean, no. I think at best, 90% of your book, if successful, will just restate things in a way that people might understand. Now, the application in the Western world is different than the application for us. If we're going to write a book about training your horse to hopefully jump successfully to 3'3" or 3'6",
mm-hmm.
I'd say yeah.
Everything's been written.
Everything you need to know has been written. A lot of the stuff that's at the cutting edge, at the high level, you don't need at that level.
Right.
That'd be like saying, do you need F1 tires to go pick up the groceries?
Right.
And nothing wrong with that horse that just jumps 3'3".
Yeah.
But you don't need any of that crazy tech.
Well, I think it's actually really empowering for a lot of us
you could just
here.
Do it.
Yeah.
What has already been written.
Mm-hmm.
But at the highest level, no, it's always new.
It seems like it's very innovative.
Yeah, people want to be, because people want to win. Mm-hmm. And, any advantage they can get, they can and should take.
Okay, now I want to dive into... Actually, I'm going to read a definition, and I'm going to ask you if you have ever navigated imposter syndrome. And before you answer, I'm going to read the definition. And this is actually something I get from you, because I'm pretty sure you've actually read out the definition on a couple of things. Imposter syndrome, also known as imposter phenomenon, is a behavioral health issue that causes people to doubt their skills, accomplishments, and intellect. It can manifest as a persistent feeling of self-doubt and fear of being exposed as a fraud. People with imposter syndrome may believe that they are undeserving of their achievements and the high regard they receive. Have you ever felt that?
I think it is important to not focus on a definition for something, but in what you choose to do. Because who cares if you've ever felt symptoms of imposter syndrome. What did you do? Sure, in my position, I come from a very fortunate position where I've been able to ride great horses since my first pony jumper.
Right.
And of course, you want to ride any of those great horses that people know that you have in a way that is right for them. Now, I could choose to let that cripple me, or I could choose not to. And if I just stay obsessed with the definition, let's say it perfectly explains everything in my being. And if I just wallow in that, who loses most? Me. So what is your choice? And who cares if you have all of the symptoms? Who cares if you have the best reasons why? I don't care. You shouldn't care. It matters what you choose to do. It's similar to the question of how do you deal with pressure? My answer to them is pressure is a privilege, is what you choose to do with it. It makes you better. If you think it makes you worse and you act on that, well, then you're the one who suffers. I don't suffer. So people need to make a choice and not think that, make a choice to act and not just wallow in some words or.
I think it's really good advice. I think it's very poignant because I think a lot of people have, I mean, I certainly talk to all sorts of people in the horse world at lower levels, at higher levels, that have said they have struggled with imposter syndrome. And I think it's really, it's a thing that we all navigate. A lot of people navigate. So what are some of your own tools? Because you not only, so you talk about you just described it so perfectly. Like, you have had so many opportunities within the horse world and within horse sport. You have competed at the top level and you've gone to the Olympics. You have a ton of pressure, and anyone who knows show jumping will say it's like it has the mental demands of golf, but it happens in a matter of minutes, like downhill ski racing. So it's a very fascinating combination of like, I would say, like, mental game, right? So what is your personal practice when it comes to mental health and specifically sports psychology?
Well, what I'd say is, look, everyone has a bunch of thoughts. I bet you everyone at the showgrounds has had thoughts, some or all of the thoughts on your definition.
You think everybody?
Probably.
I agree.
You know, we're humans. We have a lot of thoughts. We've also had a lot of thoughts of confidence. We've had a lot of thoughts of, I can do this. I can't do this. We all have so many thoughts. And I think it's important to not focus on that and focus on, well, what are you going to do? What is the action that you're going to do next? Because you're not going to get better by staying in your head. What's your action? Where do you go from there? You know, it's all fun and games to talk about feelings for hours. You don't follow that up with action, you'll be in the same place. So I don't care if you've had imposter syndrome feelings, or you've had loss of worth feelings, or, you know, you might have some depressive feelings, some overbearing pressure feelings, some, you know, this is tough. This is a lot going on. But it matters what you choose to do. It's a choice. Most people aren't forced to ride. If you choose to ride and you have feelings that are difficult for you to manage, well, make a choice to figure out how to deal with them. We can label all you want, but it's about your choice of action.
So what are 3 things that you think are available to everybody to up their mental game?
I mean, look, you can read self-help books and get a therapist. I obviously have a sports psychologist. There's nothing wrong with that. But I think it's important that people stay very action-based. very method-based, and they stay disciplined on their method. Because if they do the method, whatever they believe is correct, over and over again, and they keep having the same problem, okay, well then change one thing about your method, see if it makes an improvement. And that's how you develop your own way. There's no 3 bullet pointed system. I can't do a speech tour where I give people the answers to all the mysteries of life. For me, it's the same as riding. You show up each day, you work on the action points from yesterday, you try to make those better. If they get better, great, you find other action points for tomorrow. If they don't, maybe what you tried today was not the right thing to do. You try something else tomorrow. Who cares that you didn't fix it in a day? Just keep going. And if it's completely crippling and ruining your life, well, then you have a choice to not ride. I know this is not touchy-feely summer camp, everyone's having a great time stuff, but for me, it's you have to choose to act. Make an action. It might not be the right one, but by making an action, you learn that it wasn't the right one. Then you can try another action. If you make no action, you'll have the same result.
Yeah. I actually think that I'm going to draw a reference because as you're talking and you said, this isn't the summer camp touchy-feely vibe that everyone might want to hear, but actually, are you familiar with who Jordan Peterson is in the mental health space? He's a really, he's sort of a thought leader in psychology and in human thought. And he's very popular. And a lot of people attribute his popularity to his ability to actually just give that kind of, this is going to be a heteronormative reference, but like his ability to give that kind of like straight up fatherly advice that you might get. He's actually really well known for being pretty to the point and to say the hard thing for most people. And he's become really popular because of that, and not popular in some areas because of that. And I actually think that the collective needs those points of view. I think it's an important balance, right? To say, actually, there are things that you can do and they're not that complicated and they're available to you and you don't really have an excuse.
Yeah. When a lot of times the reason people don't make simple changes is just because it's simple doesn't mean it's easy. A lot of times the hardest change is the simple one. And they want secrets that they don't know. So it'd be something complicated or specialized or, proprietary that is simple, and they don't have to really do anything. It just like washes over them. And all of a sudden they're a new person.
Yeah.
You see that all the time. But it's often the simple change that is the hardest one, that is the one to make. But I'm sorry, it's hard. Can't change that.
I just love to let the silence sit around some of these really powerful these really powerful statements you're making. You have a couple of quite a few, maybe more than you realize, a couple of fans in fellow riders, and they actually they really celebrate how to the point and unfiltered you are. They actually, I think one referenced it as a superpower, but it also can cause quite a stir, which we've seen.
I think I'm in a very fortunate place where it doesn't hurt me to speak out or to speak my mind. It doesn't hurt me to speak my mind because I don't have to worry about clients. I don't have to worry about good relationships with other trainers so we can do business back and forth. I just don't have to worry. And so it doesn't, if I cause a stir unintentionally or intentionally, it doesn't affect what I do with my horses. My owner is my mom. So if I say something that rattles the boat a little bit, she's not going to take all the horses and go give them to someone else.
Yeah.
So I'm in a very fortunate position where I can be upfront. And a lot of people at the show are also upfront, but they choose not to be because it might negatively impact their livelihoods.
Yeah.
And you could say they shouldn't do that. They should always speak their mind, all that. They're less of a person because no. They have, there's more stuff in their equation.
Yeah, they have bills to pay, mortgages.
Than there is for me.
Yeah, and I think that's a factor that's super important that sometimes maybe the horse world doesn't always take into consideration is when you're reading a piece, when you're reading an article, when you're talking to somebody, what is their point of view? Because there's a spectrum of opinion, and it's opinion. Where are they sitting on that spectrum? You're taught it at university, hopefully. You're taught you're taught to discern what is the point of view, what is the bias that exists within this particular point of view, right? But something that I don't know if we talk maybe openly enough about in the horse world is there's a lot of editing that takes place because money makes the world go round. And a lot of riders or a lot of individuals within the horse world, I have been in positions where people have said something to me and they're like, I will never say that publicly, Noel. I will never say that.
Yeah, sure. I could, you would say, why didn't this trainer tell me what actually would help? Well, you didn't want to hear it. If you showed up for a clinic and your bridle was way too big and you couldn't make it shorter, your saddle was fit for an elephant, and you have mismatched boots and your horse is really unfit, and you've paid for this clinic. And instead of the trainer teaching you what the clinic was about in the saddle, they said, I'm sorry, you're still going to pay, but I can't teach you in the saddle. I'm going to show you what is wrong with your equipment, and until that is fixed, you can't come back. No, that is the right way to do it.
Yeah.
Because until your shoeing is right, your saddle fits, you have boots that fit for the purpose that they're supposed to be, your horse is, in a good place physically, you shouldn't be taught to ride on that horse with that saddle that doesn't fit. But that wouldn't go over well.
Economically, it wouldn't go over well.
I could do the same format with many different ways.
There's many applications of that concept in the horse world. Yeah.
And so to me, I don't wonder why the state of things are the way they are. A lot of people do. I don't. Because you look at where the incentives are, where the expectations are, and what people are paying for, what they think they're paying for. It actually makes perfect sense.
Which is why everyone needs to pick up a book. Right?
Just think for themselves.
Because you could think for yourself and pick up a book, because that is something that actually can mitigate coming to the clinic with a poorly fit saddle.
But also it could just be that they knew the right answer, but they don't have enough discipline to do it. Like, that, the horse should have been shod 4 weeks ago.
Yeah.
But you didn't do it. That is nothing about knowledge. That is all about discipline.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And there's a lot of stuff where they want to think it's about lack of knowledge, or it's really just a lack of discipline. With the knowledge that you had, if you did everything that your knowledge told you with discipline, you would be way farther ahead, even if you still lack knowledge, but you were disciplined about the knowledge you got.
Ooh.
Instead of just thinking, I'm doing all the discipline, great, it's just I lack knowledge. Like, no, you need more knowledge, sure, but it's best suited if you also can put it into a discipline program.
Just more silence. So good, buddy. I just love it. Okay. Sometimes you say, like, you've said stuff to me, or you've said stuff publicly, and then you'll get criticism for it. And I loved something you said to me when we were like on the phone once. You said, doesn't mean that I'm going to change what I said. It's like this idea of just because you get criticism for what you said does not mean that it's wrong.
I think if people are expressing their ideas and their experiences, even if it is completely opposite to my ideas and experiences, that is still helpful.
Yeah.
Both to me and to other people. Now, sure, attacking people personally, that's really not helpful for the conversation.
Yeah.
But differences of opinion are helpful. Even if I think those opinions are wrong, it's still helpful. So just because someone has a different opinion than me doesn't mean I'm going to regret saying anything. It just means that there is a conversation going, and that's not a bad thing. Like, disagreement's not a bad thing. It's how you learn. Why does that person have that difference of opinion? Is there something about my opinion that actually should be educated a bit by theirs? Because a lot of times that's the case. And you have to be open to that change. As much as I speak loudly, I also change how I think.
I think that's something that's really important to emphasize in this right now, right? Is you can have an opinion and it can also change. It can evolve. Like Mark Rashid was in the studio and I said, he's written 16 books. And I said, what's one book that just stands out for you? And he said, well, each of those books is a representation of the thoughts and the feelings and the opinions that I had at that time.
Yep.
And, he's like an icon in his space. And he said, and those have changed. I've written the 16 books. To say that I have the exact opinion that I had in each of those books is a fallacy. Thought evolves.
It should. You don't get better without change.
So good. Okay, so to wrap up every episode, I always ask each guest the same rapid fire questions. If you could read one book to the horse world, what would it be?
I don't know.
Really?
It can't be just one.
Well, you gotta pick just one.
I don't know. I can't answer that one.
Okay. Who is the most iconic horse in history?
So many ways you could do it. Because you could say Eclipse, but then no one would know what you're talking about. Milton. Because how the partnership inspired everyone that came after.
Do you think that's who, so when top riders want to aspire to what I'd call symbiosis between horse and rider, do you think that's who they think of?
Yeah, or, you could also, in that example, you could pick a horse like Chapeloux. Who else could have ridden that thing? Mm-hmm. And that partnership and the way that was, amazing. Mm-hmm. That same Gem Twist at that time, such a cool horse. Mm-hmm. Awesome, unbelievable. Hickstead, I know it's out of fashion, I get it, but remember watching them go around.
It's amazing.
Just ignore some of the other stuff if you just look at watching them go around.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Good answer. I let you say more than one there.
Yeah.
So we'll go back to, if you could read one book to the horse world, let's say if you could read 3 books to the horse world.
Everything from Jean-Marie Denois.
Okay. That's a great answer. Who's Jean-Marie Denois?
Jean-Marie Denois is a French vet. He's actually still alive, and I think he's written the best books about biomechanics, anatomy, for horses. Now, his anatomy is more about jumping.
Yeah.
Than anything. If it's for all horses, then it'd probably be the veterinary owner's manual. Mm-hmm. Literally just be that. That's horse care stuff.
Love it. Most undervalued skill as a rider.
Most undervalued skill as a rider. Simplicity.
Who is the greatest horseman or horsewoman in history?
Eric Neve.
And last question, I have a feeling I know your answer. Mares, stallions, or geldings?
Oh, mares. God, stallions are dumb and geldings are neutral.
And what are mares?
Spicy. They're smart.
Karl, I will say I had pretty high expectations of this episode and they totally met them. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you so much.
Today's episode is brought to you by Connaway & Associates Equine Insurance Services. The friendly and knowledgeable team at Connaway & Associates brings together more than 30 years of experience to offer a wide range of insurance services, including horse insurance, farm insurance, and liability insurance. Visit www.connaway.net to explore options or get in touch today.